Hi, my name is Rasmus and I'm making a 3D top-down action adventure game. So it's been a few weeks since the last update, as a lot has been going on in my real life. But I am happy to be back working on the game, and I finally got enough new features in to get a new devlog together as well. So to quickly recap, last time I added a shooter enemy and made some additions to the environment with a bridge that the player needs a keycard to open. I also created a basic dialogue system and added a friendly NPC for the player to interact with. If you missed all of that, now is the time to go back and check it out. If not, please get comfortable and I'll take you through the new additions to the game. In an effort to fail fast, I decided that it was time to tackle the most difficult thing in all of game development. No, it's not multiplayer, not balancing, not marketing. What I'm talking about is doors. Yes, doors. Let me get into that a bit while I build an interior environment. So the fun thing about doors in game development is that unless you have a true open world where everything exists at all times, doors force you to make decisions about how exactly your world is put together. Luckily, my work with tiles in this game have already answered a lot of questions about how the environment reacts when invisible to the player. But I needed to deal with the actual transitions between areas. Specifically, how do you teleport the character without leaving the player feeling disconnected and without taking the pace out of the game? So I really want the player to feel free moving around and decided not to do any kind of loading screen or fade to black. Instead, I decided to teleport the player and let the camera smooth follow function as the visual transition. Cinemachine automatically takes care of the smooth camera movement when teleporting the player outside of the screen, and my tile script already handles the visibility of the environment. So with the models and the interior environment in place, I reused the functionality of the bridge to toggle a door up and down and allow the player to walk inside a black doorway and trigger the teleport. I physically placed the interior environment below ground so that with the camera following the player, it makes it look like taking an elevator up or down. During the transition, I freeze all player inputs and make sure that the player is facing away from the door when the camera reaches the player. I fiddled around with the animations and timing of the freeze period so that it felt nice. Then I added a few enemies to the interior level and moved the keycard for the bridge down there as well, so that the player has a reason to go down there. When building a top-down game, you will at some point need to consider what happens when the player runs around the corner of the map, with the current environment potentially blocking the view. Either that, or all your levels will need to be physically linear, like running along a cliff and never finding the end. So I decided to implement a Y-angle change for the camera, similar to what happens when finding a shrine in Death's Door. Now, this is not as trivial as it sounds, since the viewing angle affects the movement direction. Pushing the up arrow on the keyboard should be up regardless of how many corners you've rounded. On the other hand, if you are holding down keys to run, it doesn't feel right that the sudden camera angle change makes you run in a different relative direction. To implement this, I added a secondary camera and reworked the movement script to take the viewing angle into account, and made sure that the movement change only kicks in when the player changes the input. Once again, I made use of Cinemachine's amazing built-in features, this time the blend option, to smoothly change between the two cameras using the camera weights. To actually make it work in the game environment, I added a trigger in the place where I wanted the switch to occur, and after a bit of tweaking with blend timings, it started to feel good and intuitive. I'm soon ready to start building some actual gameplay with all of the building blocks that I have worked on over the course of these devlogs. There is one final core system that I would like to have in place though, a currency system. At later points in the game, currency will be used to purchase upgrades and items to aid the player in the challenges they are facing. This is a pretty standard feature in adventure games, and I plan to implement it in a pretty straightforward manner. Without spending too much time on the concept, I decided to call it scrap metal and started working on the drop mechanic. After modeling some quick debris pieces and importing them to the game, I altered the die function on enemies to instantiate the scrap metal. Each enemy type will have different drop chances, and after spending some time with some weird physics behavior, I got them to spawn the way I wanted it. Instead of asking the player to run around and pick up the dropped scrap metal, I added a simple fly towards the player function. I did this by making the scrap metal objects kinematic a short time after they were dropped and initiated a movement towards the player with a set speed. Lastly, I added a tail renderer to the objects just to make them more noticeable to the player. To allow the player to see the accumulated scrap metal, I added a new element to the UI with a simple blue tilted square. Now you will pick up scrap metal when killing enemies, and it will be automatically added to your scrap metal counter. Although there is no way to spend the scrap metal yet, it already feels kind of rewarding. And that's about it for this episode. If you enjoyed watching, please hit the like button below, and if you would like to follow along as I continue to add features to the game, you might want to subscribe to the channel as well. Summer holidays are coming up, and I will be away with the family for a few weeks, but I plan to return with fully charged game dev batteries. Have a nice summer everyone, and I'll see you next time.